What if I told you that one single hour is the reason your life looks the way it looks right now? Not your genetics, not your luck, not the family you were born into, or the money you didn't start with, or the people who doubted you before you even opened your mouth. 1 hour, that's it. That's the hinge your whole existence swings on, and most people will go to their grave never even knowing it was there. Here's the hour I'm talking about. It's the one between the moment your alarm screams at you and the moment your feet actually touch the floor. That gap is that silent, invisible battlefield that nobody claps for, nobody films, nobody posts about, because it happens in the dark, alone, when no one is watching, and no one would ever know if you lost. That's exactly why it matters more than anything else you'll do today. Because what you do when nobody's watching is who you actually are. Think about that for a second. Every single morning before the world even asks anything of you, you are handed a choice. A quiet, ordinary-looking choice that doesn't announce itself as the most important decision of your day, but it is. Stay under the warmth. Pull the blanket a little more. Tell yourself 5 more minutes, just 5. What's the harm? Or throw it off, sit up. Put your feet down on a cold floor before your mind has time to talk you out of it. That's the whole fight. That's the entire war compressed into 60 seconds, happening in a bedroom nobody else will ever see. And here's the part that should terrify you a little. That scene repeats tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. For the rest of your life, until the day you die, you will wake up and face that exact same fork on the road. So the real question isn't whether you'll win this one morning. The real question is what kind of person you're building. One sunrise at a time, through 1,000 tiny surrenders or 1,000 tiny victories nobody will ever see but you. I want you to sit with a number for a second, because numbers don't lie about the way excuses do. If you steal 1 extra hour of sleep every single day, just one, that you didn't actually need, that your body wasn't actually asking for, that was pure avoidance dressed up as rest. By the end of the year, you have handed over 500 and something hours of your one and only life to nothing, to static, to ceiling staring. That's not a lazy Tuesday. That's 22 entire days, gone, vanished, unrecoverable, spent doing absolutely nothing while somewhere out there someone with your exact same 24 hours used that time to become somebody. 22 days. Think about what you could build in 22 uninterrupted days. A body, business, a relationship rebuilt from the ashes. A skill that changes the trajectory of your whole family line. Gone for an extra hour of nothing, disguised as comfort. So no, this isn't a script about mornings. This is a script about the moment you decide whether you're going to keep being a passenger in your own life or finally grab the wheel. And if you stay with me for the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly how the version of you that you keep dreaming about, the one who's disciplined, the one who's unshakable, the one who people look at and wonder how they do it, gets built. Not through motivation. Motivation is a spark, and sparks die in the wind. I'm talking about something that survives the wind. Something that survives the bad days, the heartbreak, the failures, the mornings where your whole body is begging you to quit. Stay with me, because by the time this ends, you are not going to see your mornings the same way ever again. Let's start with the truth nobody wants to hand you wrapped in a bow, because it doesn't sell as well as fantasy does. Every meaningful change you have ever wanted for your life begins with a little bit of discomfort. Not later, not eventually. At the beginning, right at the front door. The cycle of becoming someone new always starts with a small dose of suffering, a small dose of pain, because growth and comfort have never once lived in the same house together. They can't. It's physically, spiritually, and mathematically impossible. So, if you're out here waiting for the version of transformation that doesn't hurt a little at the start, you're going to be waiting for the rest of your life, and life is going to keep moving without you. You say you want to wake up early? Fine, here's the whole secret, and it costs you nothing, and it's so simple it almost feels insulting. Go to bed earlier, that's it. That's the entire hack the internet keeps trying to sell you in a $100 course. There is no trick, no supplement, no app, no 5-minute morning ritual that replaces the basic, unglamorous truth that if you want a different tomorrow, you make the decision tonight. Discipline isn't something that happens at 5 a.m. Discipline is something you set in motion the night before. when you choose to put the phone down, when you choose to stop scrolling through other people's highlight reels, when you choose to sleep over noise. The morning is just where the bill comes due for what you decided the night before. And listen closely, because this next part is the part that separates the people who actually change from the people who talk about changing for the next 20 years. A massive, undeniable chunk of what people call success isn't talent. It isn't a secret formula. It's just not being lazy. It's doing the unremarkable thing over and over when nobody is impressed by it, when nobody is filming it, when it doesn't feel heroic at all. It's getting up. That's the whole revolutionary act, getting up. There is always another level, always. No matter where you are right now, no matter how far you've already come, there is a version of you waiting one level up that you haven't met yet. And the door to that version doesn't open at noon. It doesn't open after you've scrolled for 45 minutes to wake yourself up. It opens in the morning, in that raw, unfiltered hour where you get to ask yourself the most honest question of the day. What in my life is out of order right now that I could put back into order starting today? Not someday, today. Right now, while the world is still quite enough for you to hear your own thoughts. That question, when you actually sit with it instead of running from it, is what people call the aha moment. It's the flash of clarity where suddenly you can see the gap between where you are and where you could be, clear as daylight. But here's the trap almost everyone falls into, and I need you to hear this one all the way through. The aha moment is not the transformation. It's just the door. It swings open. It shows you a hallway you didn't know existed, and then it waits. It waits to see if you're going to actually step through it, or if you're going to stand there admiring the view and then go back to bed. Insight without action is just entertainment. It feels like progress. It is not progressing. Your new life does not begin the moment you understand something. It begins the moment you move your feet. So here's what I need you to actually feel. Not just hear. Every single morning you spend those extra 60 minutes retreating instead of attacking. You are not just losing an hour. You are voting for a version of your future that looks exactly like your past. You are telling your own subconscious, quietly, without saying a word, that comfort matters more to you than the life you claim you want. And your mind believes what you do far more than it believes what you say. You can post inspiring quotes all day long. You can talk about your dreams to anyone who will listen. But the body keeps the score, and the body knows the truth every single morning at the exact moment the alarm goes off. Now let's talk about commitment. Because wanting something and being committed to something are two completely different animals, and most people never learn the difference until it costs them years. They can't get back. Wanting is soft. Wanting whispers. Wanting says, it would be nice if. Commitment is loud. The commitment doesn't ask permission. Commitment burns the exits. Some of you reading, watching, listening to this right now, you are living your life at 70%. Some of you are cruising at 80, and I'm not here to shame you for that because most of the world never even gets that far. But I am here to tell you the truth. 70 isn't going to get you where you say you want to go. 80 isn't either. What you need, what your dream actually requires of you, is 120. Not perfection, not some fantasy version of effort that never gets tired. I mean, the kind of push that goes past what feels reasonable. Because reasonable is exactly where mediocrity lives most comfortably. Don't throw the towel early. I need you to hear that one twice because it's the single most common way dreams die. Not in some dramatic collapse, not in one big failure, but in a slow, quiet surrender, 1 inch at a time, until one day the person just stops trying and calls it being realistic. So many people give up standing on the 1 yard line. 1 yard, one single yard away from the thing that would have changed everything. And they turned around and walked back because the pain in that final stretch felt bigger than the dream on the other side of it. Don't be the person who never finds out how close they actually were. Here's something I need you to burn into your memory, something to reach for on the mornings when the weight of everything feels unbearable. The last chapter of your story has not been written yet. Whatever happened yesterday, whatever mistake, whatever collapse, whatever version of you showed up defeated and small, that was yesterday's chapter. It's finished. It's bound. You cannot go back and rewrite it, and torturing yourself over ink that's already dry does nothing except waste the ink you have left for today. Yesterday, some versions of you made a choice, good or bad. Today is a completely different page, completely blank, and it is entirely mercilessly, beautifully up to you what gets written on it. This is a no retreat, no surrender kind of mentality, and I want to be honest with you about what that actually means because it's been turned into a cliche by people who've never lived in it. It doesn't mean you feel unstoppable every single day. It doesn't mean the sadness doesn't show up. Doesn't mean the Monday morning heaviness doesn't sit on your chest sometimes like a stone. Life is hard, genuinely, unapologetically hard in ways that don't care about your feelings or your plans. Life goes up and then without warning, it goes down, and sometimes it stays down longer than you think you can survive. But surviving hard isn't about never feeling weight. It's about what you do the moment the weight lands on you. It's about getting into a position fight instead of getting into position on to fold. So, when Monday morning comes, it feels heavy, and every fiber of you wants to stay curled up in what's familiar. That is exactly the moment you decide, consciously, on purpose, that this Monday belongs to you and not to the exhaustion. Rise, get up, not because you feel like it, feelings are unreliable and they change with the weather, but because you decided in advance that certain mornings don't get a vote. Here's a pattern I need you to notice in your own life, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. So many people want to play big in this world. They talk about the empire they're going to build, the body they're going to earn, the peace they're going to finally have, but they keep the whole thing optional. It's a nice idea they carry around, not a decision they've made. And the second it gets difficult, the second the resistance shows up, they quietly set it back down like it was never that serious to begin with. That's the truth. That's how you know something was a wish and not a commitment. The moment it costs something, it disappears. Everything changes the second you take that option off the table entirely. Not I'll try, not we'll see how I feel. Off the table, non-negotiable. The way of breathing is non-negotiable. You don't wake up and decide whether or not you're going to breathe today. You just do it automatically without debate because your survival depends on it. That is the exact intensity with which you need to want the life you say you want, as bad as you want your next breath. When your goals reach that level of urgency in your chest, success stops being a maybe and starts being a matter of time. Today, whichever you're reading this on, is your day to beat the version of you from yesterday. Not somebody else. Not the person on your screen who seems 3 steps ahead. Just yesterday, you. That's the only competition that actually matters, and it's the only one you can actually win because it's the only one where you hold all the cards. Now let's go somewhere a little deeper, somewhere most people avoid looking because it's uncomfortable to admit. There is a place in your life right now, somewhere specific, not vague, that you already know about. You can feel it pulling at you quietly, constantly, in the back of your mind while you're doing dishes, while you're driving, while you're lying there at 2 a.m. unable to sleep. You know what you want, and here's the part that stings. You are actively arguing against it every day. In your own head, with your own voice. You bring yourself down before life even gets the chance to. You beat yourself up over the number on the scale, over the number in the bank account, over the job that drains you a little more with every shift, over mistakes stacked on mistakes, over trauma you're still carrying that nobody ever helped you put down. And in the middle of all of that, you convince yourself there's nothing to celebrate, nothing worth acknowledging, because celebrating anything while you're still behind feels somehow dishonest. Here's the fundamental mistake buried underneath all of that. And once you see it, it changes everything. You are withholding from yourself the exact support, the exact encouragement, the exact celebration that you would need in order to actually do the hard work of changing. You're starving yourself of the one thing that would fuel the fight, and then you're confused about why you feel too weak to fight. It's like refusing to eat before a marathon and then wondering why your legs gave out at mile 2. There is always something underneath the resistance. Always. If you're honest enough to actually unpack it instead of running from it, you will usually find the real reason buried underneath all the excuses about time and money and circumstance. You'll find a belief A quiet old belief that maybe you're not worthy of the thing you want, or a belief that wanting it is somehow foolish, somehow too much, somehow not meant for someone like you. Maybe it was handed to you by someone else a long time ago, someone who said it carelessly or cruelly, and you picked it up and carried it like it was fact instead of just one person's opinion on a bad day. Somewhere in that resistance is the actual reason you don't have what you say you want, and you cannot outrun a belief. You can only find it, look it dead in the eye, and decide it doesn't get to run your life anymore. Because before you can achieve anything that matters, before the world hands you a single ounce of the greatness you're chasing, you have to believe, actually believe deep in your bones that you can. No hope, not wishing, believe. Here's the uncomfortable truth about the opportunity sitting right in front of you, the one you keep almost taking and then talking yourself out of. It's not that you don't believe in the opportunity, you do. You can see exactly how good it could be. The real problem, the actual root of it, is that you don't believe in you. There is nobody else on this earth exactly like you. Nobody with your specific combination of scars and skills and stubbornness and story. Right now, today, exactly as you are enough to begin. The only reason you don't feel like the best version of yourself is because you haven't given yourself permission to believe you already are becoming that. And here's something that sounds almost too simple to work, but it changes the entire architecture of how you carry yourself through a room. Long before you've achieved the thing, start speaking like the person who already has, not as arrogant, as instructions for yourself. Say it under your breath in the mirror before anyone else believes it. Say, I am becoming exactly who I said I would become. Speak it before the evidence shows up, because the words come first and the evidence follows the person who refuses to shrink. Your real problem was never talent. It was never circumstance. It's that some quiet part of you doesn't believe you belong in the room you're standing in, doesn't believe you deserve the seat you're sitting in. And if there is one single message worth carrying out of everything you've read so far, let it be this: it's not about behavior. It's about a shift in how you see yourself at the core. Belief isn't a task on a to-do list. It's the operating system underneath every task on that list. So ask yourself something honest right now. No audience, no performance, just you. How exactly are treating yourself like you're not enough helping you become more? How is the constant internal criticism, the withheld praise, the refusal to acknowledge your own effort, how is any of that actually moving you forward? If it were working, you'd already be who you want to be. It isn't working. It's never worked. So maybe it's time to try something radically different, something that feels almost uncomfortable in how simple it is. Try encouraging yourself the way you'd encourage someone you love. Try celebrating small wins instead of noticing the gaps. Try waking up and before you check your phone, before the world gets to hand you its opinion of you, look in the mirror and acknowledge that you're still here, still breathing, still in the fight. That's not anything. That's the foundation everything else gets built on. And this leads us somewhere important, somewhere that most people avoid because it demands something real from them. Responsibility, real unglamorous adult responsibility. At some point, and it usually happens quietly, without ceremony, you have to realize that nobody is coming to parent you anymore. The people who raised you, the systems that were supposed to protect you, the circumstances you were handed, none of that changes the fact that your life, starting today, is entirely yours to carry. Not because it's fair. Life was never promised to be fair, but because it's true, and truth doesn't wait for your permission to be true. When you stop outsourcing your happiness to other people's approval, when you stop outsourcing your validation to likes and comments and compliments that vanish the second they're given, when you stop outsourcing your sense of worth to circumstances completely outside your control, something happens that feels terrifying at first and liberating almost immediately after. You realize you could build anything because the moment you're the one steering, the moment nobody else's failure to show up for you can derail your entire day, you become unstoppable in a very quiet, very steady way. Not loud, unstoppable, steady as unstoppable, the kind that doesn't need an audience to keep going. That doesn't mean you never ask for help. Asking for help is not a weakness, and anyone who tells you it is has probably never carried anything heavy enough to need it. But asking for help and outsourcing responsibility are two completely different things. You can ask someone to walk beside you. You cannot ask someone to walk for you. The work, the actual doing of the thing, the actual becoming of the thing, that part only has your name on it. Nobody else's hands can do those reps for you. Nobody else's discipline can wake your body up at 5 in the morning. Nobody else can sit with your own thoughts and figure out what actually makes you come alive versus what you've just been told should make you happy. So here's an exercise, simple enough that it almost feels too small to matter, but small, consistent things are exactly how entire lives get rebuilt, one unremarkable brick at a time. Think honestly about what you actually want, not what looks good from the outside, what you actually want underneath the performance. Then think about what specifically around you right now aren't right. You already know what you've known for a while. Write it down if you have to, because the mind loves to hide from things it hasn't seen written in plain black and white. And then, instead of trying to fix the entire mountain in one single morning, which is exactly the kind of overwhelm that keeps people frozen forever, find the small, almost embarrassingly simple actions that would nudge you 1 degree in the right direction. The kind of small that even on your worst day, your most exhausted, most defeated day, you could still manage to do. Give that practice, that unglamorous daily practice of small corrections, a real chance, not a week. Not until it stops feeling excited. Give it real time, real consistency before you allow yourself to conclude that it isn't working or that you're somehow a failure for not having transformed overnight. Because here's what almost nobody tells you about change. It rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, in hindsight, when you look back after months of showing up and realize the person staring back in the mirror carries themselves differently now, stands a little taller, doesn't flinch the same way at things that used to wreck them completely. And when you do slip, because you will, because every single person who has ever built anything worthwhile has slipped along the way, don't drown yourself in punishment past the point where the lesson has already landed. There is a difference between accountability and cruelty, and most people confuse the two. Accountability says, that wasn't who I wanted to be, let me correct the course. Cruelty says, you're worthless, you always fail, why do you even try? One of those voices builds you. The other one buries you slowly, one insult at a time, until you stop trying altogether. And that's the real danger of being unnecessarily hard on yourself. It doesn't toughen you up the way people assume it does. It doesn't. It exhausts you. It drains the exact energy you need to actually change. Being harsh with yourself isn't disciplined. It's sabotage wearing discipline's clothes. And if you're already carrying shame, already feeling like you're behind, already overwhelmed by how far you think you have to go, piling more self-punishment on top of that doesn't light a fire under you. It smothers the one that's already struggling to breathe. So take a breath right now, wherever you are. Whatever this morning looks like for you, whatever mess you're standing in, whatever version of yesterday you're trying to leave behind, this is still your day. It hasn't been decided yet. The pen is still in your hand, and everything you've just read isn't meant to be information you nod along to and then forget by lunchtime. It's meant to be the first hour of a completely different way of living, starting the very next time your alarm goes off and you feel that familiar pull to stay under the blanket. That's your moment. That's always been your moment. What you do in it is who you actually are. Now the blanket is off, your feet are on the floor, and that's where most people's story ends for the day. They stood up, they felt proud of themselves for 30 seconds, and then they drifted straight back into autopilot. That is not what is happening here. Standing up was step one. What comes next is the part nobody claps for. The part that separates the people who post about change from the people who actually become it. Because here's the truth waiting for you the second your feet hit that cold floor. Like, stress doesn't care who you are. It doesn't check your resume. It doesn't ask if you're spiritual, if you're kind, if you go to church on Sunday, or meditate every morning, or read every self-help book ever printed. Every single human being alive is going to get slammed by extreme pressure more than once before their story ends. That's not pessimism, that's the terrain. And the sooner you stop being shocked that the ground is rocky, the sooner you can learn to run on rocks. Most people treat hardships like ambush, like life snuck up on them personally, like they were the only ones selected for suffering. But hardship isn't an ambush. It's a summon very single person gets called at some point to grow past the size they've been living at. And the call almost never arrives wearing a costume you'd recognize as an opportunity. It shows up as a diagnosis, the layoff, the betrayal you didn't see coming from someone you trusted with your whole chest, the failure that makes you question if you were ever cut out for this in the first place. Most people resist the call. They fight it, they numb it, they blame it, they beg for the old life back. But that resistance is exactly what keeps them small. The call was never punished. It was an invitation to stand in ugly clothes. So here's the shift, the real one, the one that turns pressure into fuel instead of letting it turn you into ash. You don't experience the world as it is. You experience the world you're focused on. Two people can go through the exact same collapse, the exact same rock bottom, and one of them builds a legacy out of the wreckage while the other one never gets off the floor. The difference was never wreckage. The difference was where they aimed their attention the moment it happened. If you don't take control of your focus, you don't respond to life. You react to it. And reacting is what animals do. Responding is what builders do. The instant something hard lands on you, your mind is going to ask a question automatically whether you tell it to or not. Is this the end or is this the beginning? Is this betrayal or is this a brutal kind of coaching? Every meaning your mind assigns to what just happened produces a feeling, and every feeling you sit inside of leads directly to a decision about what you do next. That whole sequence, meaning then emotion, then action, happens in seconds, mostly unconsciously, mostly on autopilot built from old habits. The work, the real grinding work of transformation is slowing that sequence down enough to choose the meaning on purpose instead of inheriting it by default. This is where the sweat actually starts. Not in the gym, not yet. In your own skull, at your own kitchen table, forcing yourself to sit with a version of pain you'd rather scroll away from. Look at the thoughts you keep repeating to yourself like a worn-out record. Listen to how you talk about your own life when nobody's grading you on it. Watch what you actually do under pressure, not what you tell people you do. And then ask the question that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Does this emotion, this grudge, this fear, this old identity, does it belong in the future I say I want? Because if it doesn't, dragging it forward isn't loyalty, it's dead weight. Here's why this is harder than it sounds, and why so many people quit before they even really start. It is almost always easier to make the same choice today that you made yesterday. The brain is wired for that. Repetition feels safe even when it's slowly killing you, because at least it's familiar killing. The hardest part of change was never the mountain everyone talks about at the end. It's the very first step, where you choose differently than you did 24 hours ago, and it feels like stepping off solid ground into fog. That discomfort isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. That discomfort is the actual proof that you left the known behind. Comfort and growth do not share a zip code, and if a decision doesn't feel a little unsteady, you probably haven't actually decided anything yet. Some people, and you'll recognize them, maybe you'll recognize yourself in this for a second, would rather hold on to their self-pity than risk stepping into possibility. Self-pity is furniture. It's familiar. You know exactly where every piece of it sits in the room. Possibility has no furniture yet. It's an empty house. Echoing, unfinished, and unfinished things are terrifying to people who've spent years decorating their pain. They'd rather narrate their past on repeat than draft a single sentence of their future, because the past, even the painful parts, at least already happened. It can't surprise them anymore. The future can. And so they choose the wound they know over the life they don't. But what if the story you've been telling yourself about your own limits was never actually true? What if you are significantly more capable, more resourceful, more powerful than the tired script running in your head? What if the truth is that you are not a character being written by your circumstances, but the author holding the pen the entire time? If that's true, and it is, then believing in yourself stops being some soft, optional, feel-good idea. It becomes a requirement, a non-negotiable piece of equipment for the work ahead, the same way you wouldn't walk into a storm without a coat. Here's a trap almost everybody falls into without ever noticing they're standing in it. Waiting for the outside world to shift first so that they'll finally feel permission to change on the inside. Waiting for the relief of finally having what they don't have yet before they believe they deserve to reach for it. It's a quiet, chronic disbelief running underneath entire lifetimes. This idea that we're passengers instead of drivers, spectators instead of creators. And it only breaks for most people the moment something good happens by accident, a stroke of luck, a lucky break. And for one brief flash they think, maybe I really am the one shaping this. Then the flash fades and the disbelief creeps back in like water finding the lowest point on the floor. Now imagine, just for a second, an entire life built on the opposite belief. Not waiting for proof, not waiting for luck to validate you, just deciding ahead of any evidence that you are the one building this brick by brick, choice by choice, whether the world claps for you or not. That single shift multiplied across every decision you make from this point forward is the difference between a life that happens to you and a life you actually author. Because here's what happens when you default into the victim seat, and I need you to hear this without flinching. When you convince yourself that some person, some circumstance, some old wound is the reason you feel the way you feel today, the only one actually paying the price for that belief is you, not them, you. The people or events you're blaming have already moved on, in most cases, completely unaware of the rent they're still collecting inside your head. And if your answer to that is you don't understand, I have every right to feel this way, you're not wrong that you have the right. But having the right to a feeling and being trapped by that feeling forever are two very different things. The stronger the grip some old event has on your emotions, the more attention you're pouring into it. And wherever your attention goes, your energy follows it like water down a drain. Living inside fear, inside old resentment, inside a grudge you polish like a trophy. None of that builds your future. It just keeps feeding the past a little more of your life force every single day. Here's something that should stop you cold if you actually let it land. A huge portion of the story most people talk about their own past isn't even accurate. Memory reshapes itself constantly, sanding down some details, exaggerating others, until people are grieving over versions of events that never quite happened the way they remember them. Which means some of you are out here reliving on a tragedy that's part of fiction, treating it like a sacred, untouchable truth, when really it's just a rough draft your mind kept editing in the wrong direction. And some people get so attached to that draft, so identified with the role of the wounded one, that they actually need the enemy to keep existing in order to feel something. Take the enemy away, and they'd manufacture a new one because hatred itself became the identity, not the situation that caused it. This is where the real grind begins, the part that has nothing to do with sweat on a gym floor and everything to do with sweat behind your own eyes. Retraining how you think, act, and feel, because that trio thought, action, feeling is what people actually mean when they say personality. And your personality, day after day, quietly manufactures your personal reality. Which means the version of you sitting here right now, reading this, breathing this in, built the exact life you're currently standing inside of. Not entirely by choice in every moment. Life throws things at everyone that were never asked for, but the accumulated weight of how you thought, spoke, and acted, repeated across thousands of ordinary days, constructed the walls you're living inside right now. So if the walls need to move, the blueprint has to change first, not the furniture, the blueprint. This is where strategy replaces sentiment, because feeling inspired for 20 minutes has never built anything that lasted. You need a framework, not a mood. So here is the architecture, piece by piece, the kind of internal declarations that, repeated with total conviction morning after morning, quietly rebuild the entire structure underneath your life. Start here. A growth mindset isn't a nice phrase for a poster. It's a complete rewiring of how you interpret difficulty. Instead of dodging challenges because failure feels dangerous, you start walking toward them because you already know deep down that friction is where strength gets forged. Instead of shrinking every time you see someone else's success, feeling threatened, feeling behind, you let their success become proof of what's possible, evidence that the door isn't locked, just heavy. Instead of parking yourself comfortably where you already are, you keep one foot pointed toward where you could be, permanently, restlessly, without apology. From there, you build the next layer. You become someone who attracts opportunity, not through luck, but through preparation. Opportunity is not shy. It is not hiding from you. It is walking past most people constantly, and most people simply aren't dressed for it, aren't sharpened for it, aren't ready to recognize it when it brushes against their sleeve. They complain that breaks never come their way, but breaks come toward everyone relentlessly, disguised as ordinary Tuesdays. The people who seize them are the ones who spent quiet, unglamorous hours getting ready for a moment they couldn't predict the timing of. That's the whole secret behind what people carelessly call luck. It's preparation, standing patiently, waiting for an opportunity to finally show up and shake hands. And that means education doesn't end the day you walk out of a classroom for the last time. If anything, that's the exact moment the real education starts, the kind with no syllabus and no deadline, just you decide on your own initiative that your mind is the one asset nobody can repossess. They can take your job, they can take your money, they can take your possessions in a single bad year. They cannot take what you've built inside your own skull, the skills stacked on skills, the hard-earned understanding, the version of you that knows how to learn faster than the world changes. The people who actually separate themselves from the pack decade after decade are the ones who never once believed they'd finished learning. Then comes the piece that decides how fast you move once you're already in motion, where you point out your focus when things go wrong. Most people are problem-focused without even realizing it's a choice. They talk about what is broken. They think about what is broken. They marinate in what's broken until, unsurprisingly, the broken thing grows. Because attention fertilizer, and it doesn't care whether you're watering a flower or a weed. Solution-focused people acknowledge the wreckage just long enough to understand its shape, and then they pivot hard toward the only question that actually moves anything forward. What do I do now? Not why did this happen to me? Not whose fault was this? What needs to happen next? That single pivot in language, repeated enough times under enough pressure, is the difference between people who lead and people who spend their whole lives waiting for someone else to lead them. This is also where purpose enters the picture, because grinding without direction is just exhaustion with extra steps. You need to be building something that outlasts your mood on any given Tuesday. Most people drift. They wake up, they perform the expected motions, they follow whatever current is strongest that week, and they never once stop asking if any of it is actually adding up to something. Then decades pass, and they look back at a life assembled entirely out of other people's expectations, wondering quietly what could have been built if they'd ever taken the wheel. When you wake up each morning with a clear sense that your hours are being spent on something that matters to you, something with a shape and direction, everything sharpens. Every decision either serves that direction or drags against it, and suddenly it becomes much easier to say no to the things that used to swallow your time without asking permission. None of this works, though, without one more ingredient, and it's the one people most often skip because it sounds too soft to belong next to words like discipline and grind. Gratitude. Not the lazy kind that gets used as an excuse to stop reaching. The kind that lets you fully acknowledge what you've already built, what you've already survived, what's already good in your life right now, while simultaneously refusing to sit still. Contentment without ambition curdles into complacency. Ambition without contentment curdles into misery. A permanent chase where nothing is ever enough. But combine them. Appreciate the ground you're standing on while still climbing. And you get a kind of fuel that doesn't burn out because it isn't running scarcity, it's running on momentum. So picture the mornings now, stacked one on top of another, each one built on this same architecture. Not motivation, which flares up bright and dies by lunchtime. Strategy, repetition, a framework rebuilt daily until it stops being something you have to remind yourself of and starts being simply who you are. The late nights spent sharpening a skill nobody's watching you sharpen. The mornings you show up prepared for an opportunity that hasn't even introduced itself yet. The moments you catch your own mind sliding into the old blame, the old self-pity, the old furniture, and you physically redirect it again and again and again, because that redirect repeated enough times is what a rewired mind actually looks like from the inside. This is the part where most people's story quietly stalls out, right here, in the space between deciding to change and actually becoming someone new. It's unglamorous, it's repetitive. Nobody's filming the version of you that keeps redirecting your own thoughts at 6 a.m. with nobody around to witness it. And that's exactly why so few people ever finish what they started here. But you're still reading, which means some parts of you already know this is different this time.